Coming up next, we're going to talk about marriage, as a lot of you believe that marriage is the key source of happiness. But do you agree? And also, is it appropriate for fathers to bathe their daughters? And at which age does it stop being okay? 一定要结婚才能幸福吗？这是我们下半小时的讨论话题之一。另外，在美国有一位华裔父亲因为帮女儿洗澡而遭到了传召，这件事情上却有文化差异吗？ We want to hear from you on these topics being discussed on our show. Send us a WeChat message as we are EZFM Roundtable. 给我们发微信来参与今天的话题讨论。我们的微信号是 EZFM Roundtable. Also find us on Sina Weibo as we are 轻松调频 Roundtable.It will soon be that time of the year when Chinese singletons in their late 20s will be nagged by their anxious parents to get married as soon as possible. Marriage, as many Chinese see, is one of the most important things in life and considered a key to happiness. That's the prerequisite for parents urging children to get married. But is it necessarily the case? Do you have to get married to be happy?年关将至，剩男剩女们又犯愁了。春节成了相亲节，婚姻作为延续了千百年的传统，被视为人生幸福的必要元素。结婚与幸福之间究竟有什么样的关系？一定要结婚才能幸福吗？ Yes, that's the question we're asking. Do you have to get married to be happy?
Well, I'm the only singleton here. I'm talking to two people who are happily married. I suppose, because you guys look pretty cheerful today, and even John. And when he speaks of his wife, he's always super nice, and I appreciate that very, very much. So I suppose marriage doesn't guarantee you happiness, but it's just like if you're not married, it doesn't guarantee you happiness either. So I suppose it is just something that might give you a bigger chance of finding that happiness, but it doesn't guarantee anything.
I mean, I think really, the question here is, why are you getting married, right? I mean, if you're getting married because your parents are forcing you to do so, or because you feel some type of social pressure, I'm not normal if I don't get married, then I don't think marriage is going to mean happiness. I think that really, marriage, unfortunately in China, partly because of the diminished role of religion, it has less and less of a spiritual meaning or value, but I think that fundamentally that's exactly what it should have and should be, is, you are making a spiritual commitment to someone, so physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual commitment to someone. And so, if you look at it in that way, and if you are serious about those commitments, then marriage can make you very, very happy. But if you're not serious, if you're not mature enough, even to make those types of commitments, what can make you very unhappy?
Yeah, I certainly agree with what John says about, it depends on why you want to get into a marriage. For the right reason, marriage can mean really happiness, but for the wrong reason, it can be the grave of love, as many people call it. Also, there's another thing that I kind of don't understand, that is, people who choose specifically to become single because they somehow despise marriage, or because they want to make a statement of their opinions that they hate marriage, that marriage is somehow, everything that is wrong. I don't agree.
I have one friend in particular. He may actually be listening, so he'll know who he is and who I'm talking about. But he's been with his girlfriend for years. This must be like the 9th or 10th year they've been together, something like that. And they had a kid recently. He's about 2 years old now, I think. But they don't plan on getting married. If you ask him about marriage, he will vociferously deny whether the necessity for him to marry his girlfriend. His girlfriend has kind of followed along, but I think she would like to get married, but in the end they see eye to eye to a certain degree. But I think that just and I know another friend of mine. His daughter is 6 years old. He's been with his girlfriend for years now as well, and they see no reason to get married. And so I think that in some regards, marriage is not necessary to be happy, but certainly what we see in both those examples, it's definitely commitment. These people have committed themselves to each other. They're not getting married because they want to be independent. Rather, they just don't necessarily see the point of going to a government office and getting some stamps.
Right. Well, some people maybe they think that way. They have a very open idea of what a marriage is about, or they don't really think it fits them, fine. But I think for the majority of people in society, we don't really see marriage as a bad thing. And for those who say, I don't want to get married, I think those are the minorities. Most of us who are not married is because that you haven't found someone that you think is worthwhile or the ideal person to commit with. And I think that is what most people feel.
Well, I mean, I would say, unfortunately, and I hope my wife is listening, that she's not the ideal person to commit to, but I have committed to her. Right, I made that choice. Well, that's the thing. I mean, like this idea that somehow, I have to find the right one. I have to find the one. You know, I think that's actually detrimental to, and number one, as you just pointed out, any prospects to actually getting married in the first place. Number two, if you do in fact someday, actually do get married, but you feel like you've settled, well, that's certainly not going to be a happy marriage. Really, it's just about finding someone, I think, that you can see yourself living with for a really, really long time. And of course, you want to love them as much as possible. You want to, share lots of experiences with them and things like that. But ultimately, I think really, if you think about it, it's also a question of how long can you tolerate this person.
Well,
it's the most unromantic sort of declaration of love I've ever heard.
It's true. No, and I love my wife to death, and I am always very grateful that she allowed me to be her husband. But at the same time, I think there's many different perspectives you can look at this from, and they're all valid.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's very interesting.
Just because I sound really practical doesn't mean that I always feel very practical, right?
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. Well, I think maybe you guys picked this topic for me because
Hang on, you should get married.
Well, I would like to one day, but I think, yes, a lot of single people are probably bogged down by the idea of finding the one. That person might not be perfect, but it should be the person that's most suitable for you. And when you are looking for someone with that idea in mind, I think it's extremely difficult.
Well,
I'm just saying from my own experience now.
Well, also, I mean, never underestimate the power of chemicals. Right. I mean, so again, looking at it from a different perspective, from the neurobiological perspective. I mean, what is love, right? What is love? What is intimacy? The feeling of intimacy? Well, really, all it really is, if you want to take a reductionist viewpoint, is just some chemicals in your brain getting released. And so in that degree, I mean, go with your gut. Right? If you feel really good around someone and it works out over an extended period of time and you guys can communicate well, then that sounds like a good candidate.
Yeah, that's true. And I think ultimately finding the one doesn't mean that there is only one single person in this whole world that fits you the most. It is, like John says, when you meet that person, you have a feeling that this person is really the right one for you and that you can see you two together having a future,
That's so
that
hard.
Sort of thing.
That is so hard.
But I think it also comes with age and maturity. It's like I was saying before. And I think this is one of the bigger
problems. You have to
problems.
see a lot of wrong ones to get the right one, too. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah. Well, there is that. But also, I think it is also a function of maturity to a certain degree because I think what you find, I mean, amongst like all the way up from university into early adulthood, a lot of times, people are dating here, people are dating there. But then what I've noticed among like my friends from university, like we've all gotten married and settled down and things like that all around kind of like the same time. I mean, if I go on Facebook and see people who graduated a year after me or a couple of years before me, they have kids. They're or at least they're married or in very committed relationships. And so I think to a certain degree it's also about just kind of growing up a little bit and saying, I need to be with someone, right? And I'm willing to make those sacrifices, personal sacrifices. Again, they may not be perfect. We might argue all the time, but I can sacrifice enough of my own independence because this is a need that I have right now that's not being filled.
Well, I'm so glad that when I go on Facebook and search for my friends, I think only 1 or 2 people are married right now, and none of them have kids. So phew, I don't feel too old just yet. And but I do think that, John, you have a point talking about the sense of belonging. As I think you get older, maybe when your parents aren't really there for you all the time or there for you anymore, Oh, fingers crossed. And I think you do need it's kind of important to have a sense of belonging. And if there's no other person out there for you, then that's really sad. And I think that is ultimately why humans want to be with another human being, picking out of the whole population out of the world, and you're with that person. And also another reason is that when you have kids, and I know a few single people who say that if it not for that you have to have a kid that can get the hukou and go to school without too much trouble, all that kind of stuff, all the mundane stuff, then of raising a kid, then it doesn't really make all that sense to get married. And today, when girls earn money, maybe not as much as men, that's really unfair that we're still not paid the same wage, but that's a different topic.
Very different.
But when you're financially independent and if you don't want to have a child, then I suppose getting married or not, having that piece of paper isn't really all that important anymore, because cohabitation can satisfy your needs in that regard anyway.
Yeah, that is true, but unfortunately, from a social perspective, it doesn't make the basis for a stable society. In terms of society, the family is the smallest unit, and again, in terms of a stable society, at the very least, you need stable relationships, and marriage does provide a lot of that. Maybe they're not always very happy, perhaps, but I think that one of the bigger problems that China really is beginning to encounter now is the culture of youth obsession, of independence obsession, and so more and more people are becoming financially independent, especially women, and they're choosing not to get married.
Yeah.
They're actually making the choice, not because I can't find someone. They're making the choice not to get married because they don't want to be tied down. They want to spend their money however they want to. Which is fine. You guys make your own choice. But at the same time, you have to remember that China is going to be facing some pretty big problems related to this type of culture, related to these consumption patterns, where it is going to be one of the very first countries to get gray before it gets rich.
Yeah,
it's already doing so. Yeah.
Yes, and with the rising rate of divorce, I think we're already seeing the consequences of this, and I think this change in social trend would mean major changes in our society, despite the fact that traditional value of someone has to get married is still very mainstream.
Right. And just one final point before we move on. Just because things are changing does not mean that they're necessarily bad, right? Just because more women are choosing to be independent doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. Really, it's just about finding the equilibrium. How do we adapt to the change and keep everything balanced?
Yes, that's true. And